And the order? Anybody
Mel,
have
do
a
you have an
preference
order
for?
preference? Do you want to be second, first, third? Not at all.
Okay, sure. Why don't I try going first?
Go for it.
Do it.
So
Okay.
Mel, Julian, Russ.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Cool. So I did these beeps last night. So the first one was at 6:59 p.m. I was talking in the kitchen with my housemates about Hinge, actually. And we were like the context, like a little bit prior to this beep. My housemate Gracie was complaining that men want a relationship after one date. And in response to that, I said, that's not been my experience. So I was laughing as I said it, looking like directly at her, saying that out loud. So that was not in my head. I didn't really have anything like going on in my mind. I was like fixated on her, looking at her face, and saying that out loud. Um, yeah. So inner experience felt, I guess, very present in what was physically happening in my world at that moment. And that's it.
Hmm. Okay. So you're mid-sentence saying that's not been my experience.
Yeah.
This is tough for me because this is interesting because I go, cool. Nice. I regret going first. Like, I don't want to overcomplicate it. So I already want to handball to Russ because I'm so curious. Because for me, I feel like any question that I ask here is just going to pick apart something that might overcomplicate. But I'm curious what Russ said.
Well, let me give you a hint, and that is, it's possible that there's nothing going on in her experience other than she's absorbed in the conversation. She's speaking, and that occupies all of the experience that there is.
Mm.
And so you're right. You don't want to go any more than that if that's all there is. But what you want to find out is whether there's anything else beyond that.
Okay.
And so I would ask, it could be that all that's going on is that you're involved, engrossed, you're speaking, and that's it, and there's nothing else in your experience. Or maybe there is, and if so, what is it?
Um, I really couldn't think of anything more to say. Like I felt very, I think because it was kind of like a funny moment, and I was laughing as I said it. Um, I just felt very present in that. Like I wasn't visualizing anything. I didn't have any auditory thoughts because I was speaking out loud already. I mean, the only other thing that I could have been aware of in the moment was like the stove was to my right and I was cooking dinner, but it was just kind of like baking away in the oven. It wasn't, I wasn't super present in that either. So I felt in this moment very like locked in to what I was saying.
Yeah, like my response here is to be like taking you on your word, and I feel like it's fraught with danger to dig apart too much, and everything that I would ask feels like a leading question.
Well, what would you ask? Because I agree it might be leading, but that's what
Well,
what might you ask?
like what I want to try and ask, and I haven't thought about how I would ask this because I can't do that in my head, so this is me thinking out loud, is like whether there was an emotive experience attached to this, which is somewhat based on the way she's recounted this beep and the context of it, but it feels like I'm leading her to consider that rather than her necessarily having that as part of her inner experience.
I don't, yeah, I don't, I guess the only emotion I was like sort of feeling was like, um, wow, that's so different to my experience. Like almost like, I guess it's not really, I don't know if that qualifies as an emotion, but it was more like struck by the difference, I guess. Um, but I think that was honestly like manifesting just in my laughter more than a conscious thought of, wow, that's so different. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Right, but it doesn't have to be a conscious thought. Like the thing, and this is
Mm-hmm.
me projecting some of my own experiences here, which is why I'm so fraught with this line of questioning at all. But like, I think you can have, as part of your inner experience, a vibe that is
Mm,
very hard to describe, but that can clearly be part of a part of your presence. So whether that's, and it gets very challenging to describe whether it's a lightness, whether it's a warmth, whether it's a something. But I think that that can be personally experienced in the same way as your inner monologue. But
mm,
I don't want to make you overanalyze yourself and drum up something that is just not there for you.
mm.
I do think the art is to try to figure out how to what the limits of those questions are, and I think that is very difficult. So here, I think Kerry has said she is laughingly saying that's not been my experience, or whatever those words are, and the laughingly shock or whatever is part of the wrapped up in the conversation, part of the conversation. And I don't think anybody would disagree with that. The question is whether there's anything that's separable away from that, and the answer apparently is no.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So if you were to ask questions here, Russ, what would you have asked? Because I didn't want to ask any of them, to be honest. But what would you have asked?
Basically what I just said. So I understand. I would have said something like, "I understand you to be laughingly saying, well, that's not my experience," and that was conveyed with humor and good-naturedness and whatever. All that stuff is there. The question is, is any of those things separable from the speaking, or is this all sort of a one piece of my experiences of responding in that way? And if the answer to that is a believable no, then that would be the end of it for me.
Mm.
Julian may have a different take on that.
Mm,
I think it's very often the case when people are speaking that there's nothing else going on other than what they're speaking,
Mm. Mm.
and you don't want to make something happen, make something appear to have happened when there's nothing else going on. But that doesn't mean that every time somebody is speaking, I'm just going to write it off and say, well, that's she's speaking, that's it.
Mm.
The question is whether there's anything else. But she believably denied that. That's when she was saying, well, there wasn't any image and there wasn't any speech. Some people have inner speech separate from the outer speech. So we can be saying, some people will say, I'm saying this innerly, as at the same time I'm saying that outwardly, and those are two different things.
But like Kerry, you've even had sort of examples of that, I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly. I feel like I remember your nose bleeding and you were thinking one thing and saying something else to a housemate or something. So like,
Yeah.
that was also like I'm aware of other times when she's described a different thing, but this felt very confident in that it wasn't that. So it's an interesting beat, to be honest. I like it. I have no further questions, Your Honor.
No cross-examination either. So on to beep number 2.
Okay.
Could you just pin down the words? Was it, that's not my experience, or that's not been my experience?
That is not my experience.
That's That is, or that's not me.
That I probably said that's not my experience. Probably shortened it.
Beep number two.
Okay, beep number two is honestly quite similar. I was then I now go on Hinge with my housemates because it's less depressing. So I'll have them help me swipe. And so we were looking at this guy's profile, specifically like the information section, so like where he's from, his height, whatever. And it said he was from a place called Lake Geneva. So I was reading that text, or I guess I had read that text. But I was looking at it, and I said out loud to my housemates, "Where is Lake Geneva?" And yeah, so I guess I would say my experience in this moment was split from like looking at the text. I had just read it, so I was really just like staring at it, not necessarily reading it in my head. And then saying out loud, where is Lake Geneva? So kind of ignoring the rest of the information on the screen, just like looking at that bit of text.
Okay. And what's most present to you here?
I would say most present actually is the visual of the text. Like I was staring at it almost as if staring at it would help me figure out where it was located. But yeah. And then I would say like the words coming out of my mouth, like I knew I was speaking, but it wasn't a very articulate thought. I was just kind of like blurting it out, but like looking at the text is mainly what I was focused on.
So looking at the text, is there more to say about that? Are you noticing anything in particular, or just generally just looking at it?
Just looking at it, like I had already read it, so it was more just like the black and white, like minimal font. I think almost like focusing in as though if I looked at it longer, I would figure it out. You know what I mean? Yeah, there's not much more to say. I think it was a little bit of a moment of like slight confusion. Like I was kind of wondering if Geneva was foreign, but apparently it's in Wisconsin. um, so, but that wasn't that wasn't like a conscious auditory thought. Like I wasn't saying, "Oh, I wonder if this is a foreign place." It was just I was asking the question and looking at the text, but kind of underneath that, and the reason why I was asking is because I thought it might be somewhere nice, but it wasn't.
So you say it's not a auditory thought, but there's also the possibility that it is a thought, like, but you're not hearing it. There's no like monologue, but you're still thinking, "Oh, where is that? Is it foreign?" Or it could be that that's more just context, or that came after, or so between those options, is there one more accurate?
I think my speaking out loud was in response to this underlying feeling or wondering. And so I think classifying it as like context would be a good way of putting it.
Okay. But there is a kind of wondering that's part of the speaking.
Yes.
It's not just like I'm curious because you said you're just blurting it out. Do you experience the speaking in the words, or is it more you experience the wondering and the words are just very automatic and
So
maybe not even
let me interrupt this line of questioning, because I'm not sure that I've heard her say that she has an experience of wondering. I've heard her say that wondering is somewhere lurking around, but not necessarily experienced.
Okay, I guess the way I kind of am thinking of it is you're kind of wonderingly saying, "Where's Lake Geneva?" Is that accurate, or is the wondering kind of looking background, or you're not sure about it at all?
Um, I I would say that the staring at the text is like probably number one. The wondering maybe number two, and the words are like blurted out in reaction to those two things as number three in terms of like ranking the hierarchy of this experience, I guess. Um,
Would you say the wondering and the words are separate, or that they're kind of together? You're just talking wonderingly, or maybe
no,
they force.
I think they seem separate. Um, yeah, it's kind of, anytime I have like a vibes feeling or thought, it's really hard to explain. But okay, so how I'll compare it is right now I feel very, very focused on what I'm saying and how I'm saying it and how I'm articulating myself. Whereas that spoken, where is Lake Geneva, almost like fell out of my mouth, sort of thing. So it didn't feel like a huge part of my experience in that sense. Um, so I felt, I guess, more present in the text and like looking at it, and this underlying wonder. Like sometimes when I speak, I think it's in reaction to a general feeling, um, or or yeah, I guess it's a feeling or vibe.
But I kind of I'm with Russ on wondering about the wondering, because we did bring it up late in the convo.
Yeah.
So I brought up that there's another possibility that it could be part of the looking, that you're wonderingly looking.
That's the way it appeared to me at the outset. Exactly that.
So
So the wondering is part of me staring at the text. Is that?
yeah, you're wonderingly staring at the text, or it could be a separate thing. Like I don't want to write that off if that's what your experience
Mm.
with, or maybe we just forced it too much in general.
I could see it being related just because I don't know why I'd be staring at text that I've already read for a long period of time. Um, but
So
that's what I was doing.
my take on this is that at the outset, your first gloss was something like, I was looking at this text, staring at it, hoping to get an answer, something like that. That's what you said. And then you
Hmm.
said, well, I was looking at the font, it was small and plain or whatever. And if it had been my turn to be asking questions, I would have said, well, are you interested in the visual characteristics of this font, its color and size and whatever, or are you interested in the waiting for the answer to appear portion of it?
Mm.
So is this a semantic or a wondering looking, or a
Um,
sensory characteristics looking?
no, I'm in this moment not curious about the font or anything. Like I mean, I was staring at it, so like I was seeing it, but that's not why I was staring at it. I was staring at it because I was trying to figure out where this location was.
And then after that, it would have been natural to ask, well, so is this wondering where the location is sort of separate from the staring? Or is it part of the staring? This staring is a wonderingly staring, as Julian put it a little bit ago.
Can you say that again? Sorry.
So I'm staring at the text. I'm occupied with the text. That seems like the primary thing for me. I'm looking at the text. And is the looking at the text, is there a separable thing from the looking of the text, a wondering where is Lake Geneva? Or is that
Mm,
part of the looking? The looking is enacting the where is Lake Geneva
I
meaning.
think it's part of it.
I find the
Um,
difference there very hard to. I know it's fine, Russ, but I'm none the wiser there personally about the distinction that you're trying to offer.
So I didn't understand what you said. You don't understand the distinction?
Yeah.
Is that the question?
Yeah.
So the distinction is Kerry originally said, "I'm staring at the text," and didn't say anything about the wondering. What she said was, "I'm staring at the text," almost like, if I'm quoting her from memory now, but something like she said, "I'm staring at the text almost like the staring of it is going to tell me where this place is." And that makes the wondering, that way of talking makes the wondering integral part of the seeing, not a separable wondering, which then, well, I'm going to look and see whether I can get the answer. So and I generally think that if you really understand what the first crack is, that's where the best answer is. Kerry knows more about her experience in her first saying of it than anywhere else. And that's not just about Kerry, but just about everybody. That's not always true, but the first blush had two things going on: staring and speaking. And then to add a third thing, a separable wondering, seems like I would vote against that being likely. Put it that way.
But then my devil's advocate thing there is that I fear that because it, not necessarily for Kerry, but in general, it can be hard to articulate, that I don't want someone to avoid trying to articulate that part of an experience because it's really challenging. And that is definitely a relevant factor here. Because, like, how do you ever trust that perhaps Kerry just never gives weight to that element of an experience? It might never be part of our experience. I'm just hypothesizing of, like, because it's really challenging to sum up, whereas other things, like in a monologue and all of these things, are easier to grab at. You know, like, that's the fear of, like, knowing how much to question, and then you're just opening up a can of worms that wasn't really present, or trying to help consider an element of your experience that may or may not be there, but is just really, really hard to describe.
So I think there probably is not an answer to that question. I think that is a worry that goes all the way down. So the risk is, if you introduce wonder as its own separate thing, then we start to analyze, well, what is this? How did this wondering take place? And where was the wondering when there probably wasn't, or maybe wasn't, any separable wondering? And if you don't talk about it, then you might miss it. And so I think there are limits as to what DES can do. So I think when we get to the end of this discussion about this beep, we're going to say, Kerry has a complicated set of neurons and whatever that's doing a lot of stuff, and it probably doesn't easily divide up separably to this part of it is doing wondering and that part of it's doing seeing, staring. But we just can't really make that distinction clearly.
True. I guess you just find the limits of what's able to be described.
Right. From my point of view, it's a worse risk to isolate out the wondering as if there was a separate wondering going on when there's not, than to leave as, well, this was a wonderingly staring. That to my aesthetic seems better. But I'm not sure whether that's a Russian aesthetic or whether that's a general truth that everybody should aspire to. I don't know the answer to that. And maybe there isn't an answer to that. What I would say, I guess my logic there is that much of psychology tries to separate things out and ask, well, let's think about this wondering and let's rate it on some kind of a wondering rating scale or whatever, stuff like that, which I think is probably a mistake. So I work against that, but maybe I work harder against that than I should.
There's a train going past me, so sorry. But the only thing I would add there, which again is probably just projecting a bit of my own experience here, for better or worse, but like I think the only way around all of that is conversations like this that then make you consider like different ways you can experience or whatever. And I'm talking like Kerry or anyone, then you go, yeah, that's interesting, I'd not really thought about that before or whatever, and it's just in the background of your knowledge as you go forward. Like that, again, this just might be a thing that definitely happened for me when we did this, and it was helpful, and then just I feel like expanded my ability to reflect on my descriptions, or like whatever it is. But I think that that's the only way around it, of having conversations and being like, oh yeah, that's interesting, I'd never considered those experiences or whatever, and then noting them, and they might never happen for you, or they might, or whatever. But I think being aware of all sorts of different ways of experiencing stuff can help without it changing how you describe.
So I would totally agree with that. I would conceptualize it maybe slightly differently. I would say that the goal of human existence, probably, and DS in specific, is in the know thyself realm. And there probably isn't a right answer to the question whether we should split off wondering on this sample. But in terms of what Kerry has profited from this, well, she's interrogated herself. She's asked Kerry has asked Kerry about this, and that has sensitized her to what Kerry does, and that's probably better than trying to be too dogmatic about the answer to the question, which I think is what you said, but recast in the language that I would use.
That's 100% what I was trying to say, yes.
On to number 3.
Sure. Take it away.
Cool. This was at 8:14. I was listening to a podcast while doing dishes in the sink. And for context, the podcast was talking about how we used to like buy something and keep it for a really long time, but then in more recent years, we just keep buying cheap stuff and replacing it over and over again. They were talking about the longevity of products. And one of the hosts made a joke that the other host had been using the same refrigerator for 30 years. And when that comment was made, I was imagining my old refrigerator that we had in my childhood, which was white and kind of a little bit beat up. It had this like almost like topographic like pattern in the white panels. There's like a little bit of rust. It was the exact refrigerator from my childhood. I wasn't imagining it within my kitchen. I wasn't imagining a scene. It was just the refrigerator. While washing dishes, but I would say like my focus was probably like 60-40, leaning towards 60% leaning towards the imagined fridge, and I was kind of like on autopilot with what I was doing with my hands. And then, I guess I was also listening, so I don't know how to break that down. But the listening was maybe even with the visual, and then like what I was physically doing was the last thing I was focused on.
Okay. Well, let's start with the visual. And by visual, the refrigerator, do you mean when you say I'm imagining a refrigerator, do you mean I'm seeing the refrigerator in my imagination?
Yes.
This is not just a remembering what the characteristics of my refrigerator were. This is see.
Yeah.
And tell me exactly what you see. And I don't care at all about the old refrigerator. What I care about is what you see.
Yeah. I would say, like, compared to most visual thoughts, this was quite small. It was just the fridge, and it was, like, no bigger than maybe like the spatula that I was washing, so like not very immersive, but it was like right in front of me. And I feel like normally I have like blurred edges, like it's not like a photograph, but this was just like the object. So it wasn't any blurred lines. It was just the object, like in my imagination floating like directly in front of me.
And so does that mean I see the refrigerator and I see only the refrigerator? I don't see anything blurred out beyond that, or no borders to a picture of the photograph. There's the refrigerator.
Yeah, there's no borders to a frame of a photo or anything like that. There's no like blurred edges of a scene. It's just the object. But I do like it is imagined, so I'm aware of that. So I can see past it, and I can see past that image in my mind. But it's like a crisp object, is what I'm imagining.
So in reality, are you saying I can see past in reality, so that this picture is out here, but the dishes are out here too, and I can see
Yes.
the dishes?
Yeah.
So does that mean that the picture seems translucent, or does it seem like I've got two seeings? I've got an inner seeing of the refrigerator and an external seeing of the...
Yeah, two scenes, almost like an overlay that I can see past. I don't know how to.
So the question that I'm asking here is that overlaying and seeing past part of your experience, or is it just the fact that I'm seeing this ahead of me and I'm seeing the sink ahead of me, and therefore they must be overlaid?
I would maybe say the second. I'm not like aware that it's overlaid. I'm just seeing
So
it, but also doing the dishes.
So I see the refrigerator, and I'm doing the dishes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And is do I see the refrigerator from the front or the side, or doesn't that matter?
The front,
Door open, door closed?
door
Doesn't-
closed.
And do I see any of the details of it, like the handle or the...
Yes, they're long silver handles, like in like 70s style.
On the right side or the left side as you look at it?
It's centered, so it's two center doors that open like this.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm looking at it straight on.
And that is seen clearly,
Correct.
and seen small, is that right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't look like I'm looking at
It's not
I'm
life
looking-
size.
I'm looking
by
at
any
a
means.
small refrigerator.
Yeah.
The seeing of the refrigerator doesn't seem to occupy my whole visual field.
No, as in like it doesn't. It's not part of my visual field. It's not part of the scene that I'm actually physically seeing. Is that
No,
what you're
that's
asking?
not what I meant. What I meant. What I want to know is, does it seem like my visual field, my entire imaginary visual field might be big, but I'm not using my entire imaginary visual field. I'm only using a little piece of it. Or does it seem like in my imaginary visual field, I'm seeing my whole imaginary visual field is about the refrigerator, but somehow it's small. Maybe that's just by comparison to the world around me. What I'm trying to do is to separate us out so that we're only talking about the inner seeing. So does it seem like the inner seeing, forgetting it all completely about the external world, does it seem like there's something that's small about this?
Yes. Normally, or not normally, I feel like oftentimes I will see things in life size. So this, by comparison, feels small.
Okay. Then I'm ready to move on unless anybody's got more questions about the inner seeing.
Yeah, I'm still wondering about the smallness. Could it be not so much a visual field thing, but more just how it feels? Does that make any sense? Like, like visual field wise, it might not be so different from another inner seeing that feels bigger, but it doesn't.
Can I say a theory? Is that allowed?
Sure. So you can see if
Yes, I like conclusions. Go.
I think so. Like when when I'm really focused on what I'm speaking or what I'm like thinking about. So if I don't have music or a podcast playing and I'm just in my thoughts, it's usually life size. But like the golden retriever in a flower crown was a lyric of a song that I was listening to, I think while I was doing other things. And this one I'm like doing the dishes while listening to a podcast. And this again is a small visual. So it's almost like my level of focus determines potentially, sorry, um, potentially my level of focus determines how immersive or large my visuals are. So because I had like a podcast going and I was physically doing something, it just does it. It's detailed, but it's small. It's not immersive.
I think we'll have to leave that as I mean, it's an interesting theory, but I think we'll have to leave it as a theory for DES purposes.
Yeah,
Of course,
fair.
but
It
it's
did remind me
fascinating.
that, to me, it made me think that maybe there's more we could have asked about the podcast. Like, you're, are you experiencing hearing this at this moment, or is it more just kind of background? And if it's experienced, is there a specific line or sentence? Um,
Yeah, I
or-
wrote down. I wrote down the line that was playing in this moment. So the one of the hosts lives in a home that was previously owned by the celebrity actress Vanessa Hudgens, and so the other host said Vanessa Hudgens got good use out of that fridge, referring to the 30-year-old fridge. And so that was the line that I was hearing and experiencing in this moment when I was also doing the dishes and also visualizing my fridge, old fridge.
Okay. And I did have another fridge scene question. You mentioned rust and some pattern on the fridge. Is that is that present at this moment? Are you seeing that here, or is that maybe that's just a description of your fridge, like what you know it to be, or is that present here?
I'm seeing it, and I think it's informing me that it's my specific old fridge. Like I'm not just visualizing a random, like tarnished fridge from the 90s or whatever. Like the pattern that I'm thinking of, like specifically refers back to that memory of that fridge. So it does feel present in this moment
Okay.
as part of the visual.
And what is that pattern as you see it here? Maybe not. You don't need to describe what it is exactly, unless or just what's present at this moment.
You can kind of just see little ridges in the door, depending on like where the light hits it, and so without getting like too into the minutia of the actual pattern, it's just, I guess, it's almost like a thumbprint, like indicating like this was mine.
Okay. And is this more you're just seeing the fridge and it happens to have all these details, the silver door handles, the patterns, the rest of this and that, or is it more one thing or a couple things in particular are catching your eye?
I think like I'm aware of the rust and the pattern, but it's more of just like the general shape that I'm more focused on,
Okay.
because the shape, like, again, is referring back to my previous fridge.
Then I'm good on this.
So I had a couple of questions about so the podcast is going on, and you quoted a line about the podcast going on. That quotation is, I'm gathering, as being a description of the real world. This is what the podcast was actually saying at that time.
Correct.
Now my question is, are you experiencing that? Do you hear that, or is that filtered that out?
No, I'm
So-
definitely experiencing that.
Okay. So I'm hearing the podcast
Yes.
with meaning. meaning I'm hearing and understanding what the podcast is saying. And the
Yes.
podcast is talking about the actress got good use out of the fridge. I'm seeing the fridge. And then about the dishes. So I understand myself, and I understand that I am doing the dishes, skillfully doing the dishes. I'm not breaking them or whatever. So obviously I'm seeing them and processing it. That doesn't necessarily mean that I'm experiencing that. I'm experiencing the dishes. It could be totally on autopilot.
I would describe this as being on autopilot.
So I'm accomplishing the task, but I'm not really directly apprehending it.
Right.
My experience then is divided up between hearing the podcast and seeing in my imagination the refrigerator.
Yes.
Then I'm good.
Cool.
All right.
Number 4, which is Mel's.
Back to me.
Number 4 was at 8:45. I was reading on my phone it's a ski resort called Eldora. I was looking at their website because I was trying to see what lifts were open, and I was just like quickly skimming the page and was reading the line, or I guess it was like a title of a section on the website, and it said Jenny Creek / Arestua, I think I'm saying that correctly, Arestua hut access. And so I was saying those words. I didn't say / I just said Jenny Creek Arestua hut access out loud, but in my head. And I was simultaneously imagining a hut or a yurt similar to a hut I've previously like hiked out to and skied around in last winter. So I was kind of seeing this hut, but in the Eldora context. And basically I was I was trying to like place where this hut would be in the context of Eldora, because I didn't know that there was a hut there that you could stay at. This I wrote was more of a vibe. So it kind of feels like there's sort of 3 things happening, and I don't know if this was all at once or like in very rapid succession, but I read the word out loud in my head. So I said Jenny Creek Arestua hut access, and as part of that I was visualizing a hut that I've previously been to, but in the context of a different mountain, because I couldn't figure out. I was like, oh, I didn't realize that there was a hut here, wondering if I could book it, if I could ski out to it, et cetera, et cetera. But that all those questions of, oh, I wonder if I could book it, was not auditory. It was like a wondering. It's a bit going on in this one.
So if you attempted to give weight, percentage-wise to each of those elements, can you?
Yeah. The voice was, I think, the most dominant. Mm-hmm. And the visual that I had in my head, it was detailed, but it almost felt like faded, like not... I keep saying the word immersive, but not immersive. It was there, but kind of just barely. But it was a full scene, so I had like the mountains and trees and snow, and then this hut. But I would say
sorry, keep going.
voice, visual. And I'm not really sure how to place the wondering again. It's kind of a confusing one, but that's like under it all. But I would, voice, visual, wondering would be how I would rank it.
And so you're experiencing your voice saying those words out loud, but in your head, as opposed to like hearing you're speaking them. That's your experience.
Yes.
And the visual aspect is very fascinating to me in terms of like, is this another one like the previous example of where you're seeing this in front of your reality, or like how are you visually experiencing that scene?
This one felt like normally it's like a clear overlay,
Yeah,
and this one almost felt the best way I could describe it is like in the back of my mind,
yeah,
but I don't really have a way of visually distinguishing that from my other visual thoughts. Like it just felt because I was still looking at my phone, and that was more clear visually than this scene in my mind, um, and it was faded and brief, is how I can describe it best. But it didn't feel like a clear overlay, which is what I normally describe. Um, like if instead of it being in front of me, it was almost like it was literally like back here,
yeah.
um, kind of like literally in the back of my mind. Um, I don't know if that makes any sense.
It actually sort of does, which is astounding based on my own experience. But like, it's like another imagined reality in a sense, even though you're not like psychotic and you're not thinking you're in a different reality, but like it's a distinctly different scene that you're experiencing at the same time, but with you, it's not an opacity per se, but it's not the clarity of the world around you.
Yes, yeah.
And this is
I mean, sorry, there's a little bit of element of opacity because it is like
yeah,
it feels faded. It's not as like vibrant
yeah.
as normal visual thoughts.
And you said it was brief. Do you mean in terms of like it's a flash of a scenario and then it's gone, or
Maybe brief isn't the right word. Um, Brief's probably not the right word. It just felt less dominant, is how I
sure?
would say.
And it's an imagined reality in the sense that you're taking the visual cues of what are in front of you and sort of merging that with another real life place that you've been, or you've entirely made up the location that's in your brain.
It's kind of like my memory of Eldora, the ski resort, and my memory of this hut that I went to in Wyoming, very far away. I've like placed the hut in my memory of the Colorado ski resort. So it is completely made up, but it's two real places that I have been and I have seen that I've combined.
And sorry, just again remind me of the percentage levels of experience for you in terms of that visual thing with the you speaking and the wondering that's clearly attached to all of that.
Yeah, I would say percentage wise, it'd be like 40% my voice saying, or maybe not, maybe like 35, not to get super niche, 35% my voice, 35% my phone. No, hang on. Okay, we'll do 40% my voice, 40% my phone, 20% this weird visual behind me. Yeah.
And the phone element is you looking at it and deriving meaning from the visual cues that are in front of you, as opposed to, like Russ said earlier, like being interested in the font itself or the whatever, like visually you're looking at your phone screen, you're taking in the words, you're understanding what the words mean and doing that, or is the visual element experienced in a different way?
It's less so about like, the font or the color. Like I remember that, but that wasn't what I was taking in this moment. It was more like this prompted like a huh Um, I didn't know that there was a hut here, even though that thought wasn't auditory. But it was more, I guess, like contextual. Like what I was reading was prompting a questioning, kind of.
Yeah, so like similar to that bit from before where your visual cues were related to the wondering was
Yeah.
related to the visual aspect.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna shut up now. I've been talking for a long time.
So you said it was sort of like behind you. Could you describe what you mean by that? This the seeing of the yurt.
Yes. I don't know how to get. It was on my right side, if that's helpful. It was like because I was sitting in bed, like sitting upright, and my phone's directly in front of me, and so it was kind of. It's weird because I was visualizing it as if I was looking at it straight on, but it felt like it was behind me, almost like I have eyes in the back of my head, which is weird. But
And I'm gathering not only eyes in the back of your head, but eyes behind the back of your head, because you imagine yourself looking forwards at a scene that is behind you. Is that right?
yeah. Yeah, it's a confusing one.
So while you meditate on that, let me point out to Mel that she didn't ask this line of questioning. And I'm guessing, I'm presuming, guessing, whatever, speculating, that it's because it seems like that's not possible. But when people say something is in the back of my mind, sometimes they mean in the back of my mind, like here. And sometimes they mean that as metaphorical. And Mel, who doesn't see things in the back of her mind, would take that as being metaphorical and so didn't ask about it. And when in fact Kerry is quite confident about it being in the back. When I look at Kerry talking about this, there's no question about it. It's here. I don't know why the fuck it's here, but it's here. and there's no ambiguity about that. How to speak about it is a different deal. But the experience is pretty clear.
I actually disagree with that. I think it was actually sort of the opposite. I almost believed Kerry too much. I could totally understand what she was saying. But I didn't do any line of questioning there. But almost like with the first beat where I'm like, no, I fully confidently believe what you're trying to articulate, and I have an awareness of what you're trying to say.
Okay. So let me go back to Kerry. So I'm gathering that the seeing is as if the seeing is looking forwards. It's not like I'm looking backwards at the scene. It's like I'm looking forwards at the scene, but the whole seeing is back there somewhere.
Yeah.
And that I would use as an example of the whole thing about whether something is overlaid in the real world doesn't matter. This imaginary seeing doesn't have to exist. Even the seer doesn't have to exist in the same place in imagination as in the real world, because the imagining seer is somewhere back there, looking this way. So the seeing experiences can be entirely separate, and you don't have to worry about whether something is overlaid or not.
But on the other hand, it could be overlaid.
Could be.
I thought some samples seemed like more like it could be, but I see what you're saying, that it doesn't necessarily have to be.
So what makes it difficult? So Julian is right. It can be overlaid, but the problem is that people's presuppositions is that it must be overlaid. And so when Kerry has said in the past, well, it's overlaid, my guess is that much of that is presuppositional, driven by the natural attitude. Well, if this is here and that's here, well, that must be overlaid on it. When I think experientially, that's just not true. So the trick or the art, and it's a complicated thing, is to try to sort through what of Kerry was Kerry saying this is overlaid. Is she saying that because she experiences an overlayment, or is she saying that because well, it must be overlaid because this one's here and that one's there. And that's why the questioning, that contributes to the difficulty of the questioning.
Hmm.
And I think Kerry, we're in the 10th day, and Kerry is still somewhat confused about the difference of what is natural, what must be because it's in the natural world, and what's in the experiential world. Some people find that easier to give up, and some people find it more difficult to give up. And that's not a criticism of Kerry. That's just some people by their 10th sampling day would be saying, well, this is back here, and that was the scene back there, and they'd be happy with that. Kerry is still saying, well, that's weird, because it doesn't seem like it could possibly be. And so our task is always to try to help Kerry to differentiate the real world from the experiential world, the epoché, as it sometimes is called. So I'm happy with number 4. Mel looks like she's got a question. You want to ask a question, Mel?
No, it's not. It's not a question. My brain's just doing today's version of storyteller conclusions and curiosities. But no, I'm not going to do those right now.
So my version of that it's this kind of thing that makes DES, from my point of view, totally interesting. It's like Kerry is presenting a 3-dimensional crossword puzzle or something. We're trying to figure out whether this layer comes from her presuppositions or comes from her experience. And the task is to try to get her to suspend her presuppositions without talking her out of her experience. And that is by no means a trivially easy thing to do. But it's a challenge, and for me, it's entirely like sort of the ultimate challenge. It has to do with my ears and my eyes and my body and everything is involved. Trying to get behind Kerry's words to what she's trying to say about her experience. And it's sort of like the ultimate challenge, seems to me.
I agree. And it's because, like, as Russ alluded to then as well, like Kerry, it's totally hard for us to be like, I'm pretty damn confident this was how I experienced something. But as I'm saying the words out loud, I'm aware that can't be true. But I'm certain that that's how, so when you're saying like, well, I'm experiencing this reality and then there's this reality happening there that I'm definitely experiencing, but like, I know that like, what the fuck am I saying? But like, we can all, when you start to do this, appreciate different versions of that, where you're going, that doesn't make any logical sense, but I get it because I've had a version of my own thing of that you're like, yeah, but I definitely experienced it.
Right.
That's what's interesting.
One of the most delightful things about DES, from my point of view, is watching Kerry struggle to say, I'm absolutely certain this is what my experience is, but I don't believe it. It seems weird. I'm a little crazy. and wrestle with that, because that's like Kerry at the quick. It's to me that's it indicates to me that Kerry is trying her best to tell me about what's going on in her experience, and that's it's an honor to be there and an enjoyment to witness it and a beautiful thing to see from my point of view. And it makes the whole
Glad
effort.
you enjoy the struggle.
It's generally
makes the-
fascinating. Like, there are so many times, even today, when you're like describing these like super visual scenes that clearly I can't do or whatever, and you're like, wow, that is so cool. That is so interesting.
On to number 5, which would be
Okay,
Julian's.
can I just? I've been wondering about this yurt because I can't quite picture a yurt. Can you describe what you're seeing there?
Yeah, a yurt is
So let
like
me interrupt.
Not necessarily what a yurt is, but like hear what
oh, when
you're
I'm visualizing.
yeah.
Yeah. I'm specifically visualizing the view of a yurt from the outside on a hilltop that I have stood on. So I'm looking down at a real place. It's got a window at the very top, and then it's a circular tent held up by like wooden slats with a chimney. So like the way that I'm visualizing it, because I'm seeing it how I've seen it before, which is like almost top down from a hillside. I'm visualizing that same angle, but the hillside is Eldora, not Wyoming. So it's like a tan circular tent with a window at the pointed top, and then a chimney like in the back.
Tent like canvas tent.
Canvas, yeah.
So let me suggest, if you really want to keep so this is a good example of how Kerry can be confused about what's in reality and what's in, because when you asked your question, Julian, I think you wanted to ask about her experience, and she started to tell you about the definition of a yurt. So she started to tell you about something that wasn't in her experience. So if you can encourage her to say, "Tell me what you see, Kerry," and if necessary, start each sentence with "I see." So I see the yurt, I see the top, I see the canvas, then that makes it clear to you that we're talking about your experience and not about what a real yurt is. A real yurt's made out of canvas and a real yurt circular or whatever.
Yeah.
The I see crutch or gesture.
Questions. Cool. And then some more nitty-gritty stuff. Although we might be too far in the weeds for that. But at one part it seemed like there was a trying to place or wondering part of it, and then later when you gave percentages, there wasn't the wondering part. So I was kind of wondering about the wondering.
Yes. I was hoping you wouldn't ask any follow-up questions around that because I don't know how to say it. Like, again, the wondering in this instance feels tied to the visual.
Okay.
Because in my visual, am placing a yurt where I think it would go in Eldora, but that's likely not where it is. So that feels tied. Yeah. And the wondering is part of the visual.
Okay. I'm good on that beat too. Done wondering about the wondering. All right, so we have time for another one. Is everybody done?
I think I'm gonna have to love you and leave you because I had someone message me half an hour ago about work. So I apologize if I stopped yapping. I would have got more.
Well, then what we should do is we should decide what to do next here. Do we want to sample again, or are we into the phase where we want to have a conversation? Kerry's got some questions that you wanted to ask. Mel has probably some questions she wanted to ask.
I think that's up to Kerry, personally.
Oh wait, do you mean continue with the beeps today, or do you mean
For
in
next
general?
time. Should next time be another sampling day, or next time be the debriefing conversation, or whatever you wanted to call that?
I mean, I feel ready to debrief, but I want to make sure that you guys have gotten everything that you need out of this.
I think we're probably moving towards debrief. So the next one would be a debrief conversation, and there's nothing to stop us after that to sample again.
Yeah.
But,
Okay.
But I'm thinking that we've probably accomplished. Is everybody on the same page about that? We're
Yeah.
ready to move on. All right. So you can go, Mel, and we'll by email we can figure out when that's going to be, and.
Yeah, great. I can pretty much,
but-
I can make anything work. I just, then after an hour I need to run. But yeah, I presume I can do anything.
Okay.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting.
Thanks. Bye.
So do
We
we
also
want
never
to,
do the.
let me look at my calendar actually, see whether we're supposed to be somewhere. I've got 5 minutes, so do we want to?
Yeah, let's not rush it. I also have a dog for the weekend that I'm supposed to walk right now.
So maybe we should call it a day here. And,
Yeah.
all right. So I would say, Kerry, you've been doing great, and when I've been saying you haven't kept this apart from that or whatever, I want to make sure that you didn't understand that as my being critical.
No,
That's
not at all.
that is the challenge.
Yeah.
It's hard work.
But we'll-
All right. So do we want to decide when we're going to do it again then? And
we could plan
Sure.
it.
and
Do
again
you-
would be when we want to have a debrief. And the rules of that debrief is that you should be able to ask anything that you want to ask, and we should be able to answer or decline to answer. But if we answer, we should answer fully, which is to say we should have the same rules apply to us as we have asked you to do. You could have said it's none of your business, and that would be fine. And if you ask a question, I should have the right, and Julian and Mel or whoever should have the right to say it's none of your business. But if it is your business, then we should try to answer it honestly.
Cool.
But-
Yeah, I would love to ask you guys questions.
Okay.
I wouldn't mind having next week kind of off, but then it's like the week before Christmas. I don't know if that's really chaotic, but between the 16th and the 20th is more preferable for me. I'm traveling on the 21st, but
That's fine with me.